is one thing I just kind of like, I'll get back to evolution in a little bit. But before I continue, there is something I just kind of wanted to mention. And this is something that weighed pretty heavily on my mind. And I don't know if any of you guys feel that way, but I recently turned 30, and that's a big deal for me. I don't know if is there anybody that's past 30? How many people have passed 30?
Huge deal.
Huge deal. I remember actually before I turned 30, I would have panic attacks fucking every day. I didn't know what I thought I was going insane, I'll be honest with you. And unfortunately, I'm the oldest one of my group of friends, so you go over to your friend and you're like, dude, man, I'm having panic attacks. He's like, what are you talking about? You sick. Now, the reason I was having panic attacks is, well, as an atheist, I have to admit that there really is no afterlife. And when I thought about my own mortality, and I think it really becomes present and clear when you do turn 30, it is the first time you really think to yourself, I'm going to die. That's a disturbing fucking thought, right? You're like, I am going to perish, and I'm just going to, one day I'm just going to not wake up. And when I really thought about what that meant, I was having panic attacks all the time. And it made me think about how difficult it really is to accept reality when you are an atheist. I don't know about most of you, but I usually feel that religious people are kind of living in a bit of a bubble and are experiencing a fairly major delusion, but I'm sympathetic towards that delusion.
Very comforting delusion.
It's very comforting indeed. And if you were to really ask yourself sometimes, what would I rather? Would I rather stop existing? Would I rather experience what it felt like before I was born? Well, you don't remember what that feels like, so obviously it's not really that good. It's not bad, but it's not really that good, right? So, and there was this one time, I think around that particular period, and I felt, I'm not going to say vulnerable, but fuck, I felt crazy. And there was Jehovah's Witnesses that came to my house, and I got to admit, I'm a bit of a fucking asshole, so I just love bringing them in, because I want to know what people think, It's like, why do you believe? And I always figured that the best way to find out what someone believes is to hear their pitch. Yep. So I was like, let's hear what your pitch is. And the first thing that they asked me was, wouldn't you like knowing that your loved ones are going to be with you when you die? And of course the answer to that is, yeah, I would love that. What is your point? And I felt, I think this is one of the major aspects of why do people believe in it, and it's because belief is comfort. I didn't have that comfort, as having to admit my own mortality was a very, very difficult thing for me, and it took me a little while. And I'm sure most of you, as you get to that age, you might actually feel the exact same thing. Now, I hope you don't waver. I hope you don't switch games here on me. But understand that it's natural for you to feel this way because we are afraid of death. And we are aware of it. I'm not entirely sure of other species that really think about death as much as we do. But
we're supposed to be the only species that is aware.
We're supposed to, but we're having a little bit of trouble communicating with others. Maybe whales know it. And it would seem to me that elephants seem to know that they're going to die because they always seem to die in the same places. So maybe they also have a bit of an understanding. I think it's a bit of a hubris for us to think we're the only intelligent species on this planet. Everybody else is a dumbass, right? There's obviously a gradation. I think that most recently a group of scientists was suggesting that dolphins should be considered non-human persons. I kind of agree with that. Why should we think that simply because we can manipulate tools or we can invent things and we're just so awesome? Are we really that awesome? Maybe not always. Sure, we could build impressive little structures and talk to each other and that kind of stuff, but there are some pretty awesome creatures. What do you say?
We can kill each other better than you know.
Well, actually, it's funny because we can't. This is the funny thing about humans. I remember I was reading a thing again by Stephen Jay Gould, and he was suggesting that we are a form of retarded apes. And the reason he was saying not retarded as in we're stupid, but developmentally we are a little bit stunted. If you were to grow your gestation period should probably be close to 2 years, but we pop out at 9 months. We continue to grow out of the womb. Most other species don't do this. Most other species come out, their bones are fully formed, they're ready for their environments, except for maybe the marsupials, which are developed outside the womb. But yeah, we are a little bit retarded. And the funny thing is, too, that we maintain some of the aspects of neoteny, which is, neoteny is, you ever look at a baby and it's got these just massive eyes and you melt, right? Well, these features, these juvenile features, are things that we maintain. Think about relatively how weak you are compared to, say, a 7-year-old chimp. He could kick your ass. And he's tiny, he's like this. You figure, I'm just going to... No, he'd probably grab your leg and toss you over. I mean, we're very weak. And we're actually pretty bad at killing each other. I don't know if many of you watch combat sports. I have another blog, fightlingo.com. We talk about mixed martial arts. And the funny thing is, when you watch a fight, the most common way for a fight to go is that the guy will break his hand. That's what will happen. That's why you need to pad your hand with like these pillows. It's not so much because you don't want to knock the other guy out. It's because if you punch him, you don't have any padding, your hand will break into a million fucking pieces. So if you think to yourself, well, we kind of suck. We can't even hurt each other. It's like bone versus bone, and bone loses. So we are, I would say, relatively bad at killing each other. Unfortunately, we're also really clever. So we can kind of grab a stick and be like, come here, you little bastard. So we're cleverer than other species. But in terms of raw ability to kill each other, we're actually pretty bad at it. And I think that's kind of a good thing, if you think about it. I haven't made my mind about that yet. No. Now, I want to go back to talking about evolution a little bit.
Nobody beats us for volume now.
What'd you say?
I said nobody beats us for volume now.
I would say that cockroaches beat us for volume. I mean, insects, I think for every human being, there's roughly about 100 million insects out there. So if those insects decide to attack you, they'd probably blanket the sky in darkness if they were just coming after you. The insects are after me! So we're not relatively that, populous, but we do leave a pretty big footprint. So maybe that's kind of like our claim to fame. Be like, we're the most polluting species on the planet. Yeah. Be proud, everybody. Be fucking proud. Okay, I want to go back to talking about evolution. One of the things, again, like talk about whether or not you can square evolution with religious belief is you have to think about all the species that have existed in the past. Now, of the billions of species that have ever existed, 99.9% of them have perished. They went nowhere, they died, they're no longer here. Now, if you were to say, well, God was the designer, you're like, this is the worst designer in the fucking world. He would be fired immediately. If it took him that many failures before he finally had a success, you'd be like, God, man, not very impressed. Not very impressed. You're done. Here's something I want to talk about in terms of religious belief. Now, this is my personal belief. I don't know if I can defend this. This is just me talking. But I believe strongly that intellectual integrity is the antithesis of religious belief. Now, I remember the people who put up their hands. My question to you is, how did you lose your religion? Did you lose it because you started asking questions? Did you lose it because you were trying to find out those answers? And every single time you came up with a new one, your religious faith started to be chipped slowly. And you're like, this doesn't make sense. Why is there so much suffering? Or why is it that people die for no fucking reason, right? Like every single time you ask this question, these questions, they chip away. Sam Harris and the faith. See, we got another one right here. Yeah, Sam Harris, the man. But in terms of intellectual integrity, I want to tell you a bit of a story about a man by the name of Johannes Kepler. He's the guy who came up with the laws of planetary motion and discovered that planets follow on ellipses. He is the last astronomer that was also an astrologer. And when he started trying to understand, he wanted to defend the Copernican view of the universe, because before then, everybody believed in the Ptolemaic version, which was basically the sun, the Earth is the center of the universe, and everything else rotates around it. Every once in a while, you would come up with an inconsistency, most particularly the orbit of Mars, which would sometimes sort of like seem to loop, and nobody could really understand why that was. They tried to make refinements to the Ptolemaic version of the universe. They'd say, oh, well, everything is along little loops, and they'd just add more circles all the time because they couldn't square it off. They couldn't let go of the idea that things didn't necessarily